but we all have our own specific vibrational frequency. And
Yes,
when you
that's
meditate,
so good. Yeah.
when you don't realize it, or maybe you do sometimes, you're dialing into that specific vibrational frequency that kind of takes you back. What I like to say, takes you back through a pathway to
Yeah.
that universal self where we're
Right.
all connected.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So if you've been following me for any length of time, you know that one thing I recommend almost constantly is the practice of meditation. But meditation can be difficult, right? Especially in the beginning. So I'm so excited today to introduce you to a friend of mine, Andy Kelley, also known as the Boston Buddha. Andy is a meditation teacher in the Boston area, and we're going to have a conversation today about meditation and how to make it easier. So welcome, Andy. So good to see you.
It is an absolute pleasure to see you, and it's an absolute pleasure to be on. Thank you for thinking of me.
For sure. Well, I don't know where to start. I think I'd like to start with just the Adidas situation that we both have going on here.
Yes, in Boston, we call it the Southie tuxedo. It's usually
I
the
love it.
Irish. We all wear
I
matching pants and jackets. So I've become a fan of wearing them all the time.
I love it. Me too. I have quite a collection. So today to prepare, I was like, which one should I wear? So this is the one I picked, and
I
you're
love it.
rocking yours.
I got
So
mine. I feel like
anyway,
we're on
so
the
I was saying before we press record that, yesterday I was going through my YouTube archives, I guess you'd say, and to fish out that one that you and I recorded 13 years ago, if you can believe it, in Cape
yeah.
Cod. So I can't believe that it's been 13 years since we filmed that, but I have to say we look pretty cute.
Well, I was thinking I can't wait to go look at it again, but I
Yeah.
was thinking you look the exact same as 13 years ago, and I look 90. If somebody's doing something right, and somebody's not.
Well, the one thing I wanted to tell you before we get into it too is I have a confession to make, which is
Sure.
that at the time of that video, at the time we recorded it, I was totally, I was very interested in meditation, and I did meditate, now and again.
Yeah.
But I didn't meditate every day. That's my confession. And so what I wanted to tell you is that I guess it would have been around 2017 was that I really, it's like, okay, this is it. I gotta, get more devoted to this practice because I could feel the power of it. And so since 2017, I have been meditating pretty much every single day. So like 6.5 years, I've been
Yes.
meditating every morning. So I
Congratulations.
say that because I notice the difference, it's kind of like exercise. If you just exercise once in a while versus, like a daily dedicated practice. So
Yeah, I feel like, first of all, congratulations. And that's the reality of it, right? I always say that I like to say that my ego probably wants to tell you that I've been meditating every single day for 18 years now, but I've been meditating for over 20. And
yeah,
those first 2 years were like, oh, this is great. I don't need to do it anymore. What's
yeah,
wrong with me? I
yeah,
should meditate again. What's wrong? And so it's like an up and a down. And it took me 2 years to figure out that if I just do it consistently, and
yeah,
at the time, I didn't know what I was doing.
yeah,
If I just did it consistently, you start to figure it out. The mind and the body reconnect in a way that I think was taught out of us when we were very, very young. That authentic you kind of
yeah,
gets all these layers put on. And when you start meditating, those layers start to fall away and start to peel off. And the confidence comes, that authentic you comes back out that knows that this is what's important. And so
yeah,
for me, touching that, every single day is like brushing my teeth. Where, yeah, if more people looked at it like physical exercise, the
yeah.
importance and treated it like physical exercise,
Hmm.
they know that it's not going to take like it's not going to be that quick fix. It's going to
Yes,
take some
definitely.
time, mental repetition to build a muscle against the resistance of not wanting to do it, and build
Yes.
a muscle against the resistance of not wanting to meditate. Like you need that muscle against resistance to notice what's going on in that inner landscape anyway.
Yeah, right. Because you just get, what I found is that you just get pulled right into like what you're describing. I consider to be conditioning or programming from maybe from our early experience. And so that pull, I actually call it a hypnotic pull because it's so very strong. It's so very strong to get sucked into. And so if you're not actually actively disconnecting from that. In fact, recently the guide that I channel is talking about that as like she describes it as kind of like a radio station, and that it's a vibrational frequency that most of us are tuned into, right? So
Yeah.
it's like meditation is changing the dial, like changing the channel, changing the dial so that you're of a different kind of level of consciousness or awareness, even momentarily, so that you start to see, that programming, that conditioning, right?
I love that analogy too, because it's so important. And I love that you brought up the radio frequency, because a lot of, I'm much older than you, so I appreciate the fact that you're pulling up that a lot of people don't even understand that anymore, right? Those car radio dials, right? But we all have our own specific vibrational frequency. And
Yes,
when you
that's so good. Yeah.
when you don't realize it, or maybe you do sometimes, you're dialing into that specific vibrational frequency that kind of takes you back. What I like to say, takes you back through a pathway to
Yeah.
that universal self where we're
Right.
all connected.
We're
And
all
you don't have to know that, intellectually. You
Mhm.
just start to feel it. And when you start to feel it,
Yeah.
then you can kind of trace back, the thought process that goes into tracing your own awareness back through that path. So when you come out of meditation, you're bringing a little bit of that back out. And so you
Right.
are more connected, not just with yourself, but deeply with others.
And then do you find, because it's almost like a little water drip, this is kind of like how I'm thinking of it in the moment, because every time you sit down to meditate, it's like, it might just be a subtle change, but maybe this is why the daily practice or regular practice is so important, because the more that, that water is dripping, it's like, okay, every time you come out, it's like more of an effect of that being the more authentic you versus the conditioned you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you're tapping into something that you're bringing just a little bit out. So maybe that's like, sometimes for me, I start to see it in my reactions or
Mm-hmm.
my overreactions. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll catch myself before I overreact, and I'm able to cut that emotional hook. Whereas
Yeah.
maybe a few weeks before, I would just trip into it, because we have that conditioning that says, well, if you trip into it, you're going to get the same result, and
Mm-hmm.
that, but it worked the last times, even if it's painful, that worked. So
Yes.
be able to become self-aware in the moment is a skill set that I believe
Mhm.
that can be developed over a consistent, regular practice. And in reality, that's, I don't know, maybe whales or dolphins. I can't say, but it's amazing that with this one species that has this ability to
Mhm.
figure out what's going on in here and
Mhm.
in here, we
Mhm.
can be able to train ourselves to self-reflect in the moment. And meditation is just helping us, give us that ability to not only strengthen it, but really harness that ability to develop it. So
Right.
yeah, the drip, kind of accrues over time.
Yeah. So just with that in mind then, because obviously when we were hanging out 13 years ago filming that video, you had already broken free, I would say, from a lot of the I'm going to call it mental constructs. That again is a term from my guide, but you had already broken free of a lot of the mental constructs in terms of your identity and who you should be in the world and who you thought you were and all of that. You say that in our little video. So has that process continued for the last 13 years? It's like how has that affected you up until this point? Like, do you feel like you're just blooming more as your authentic self all the time, or
At some days, and then some days just being as real as possible. I feel like
yeah,
I'm just scratching the surface,
yeah.
what I was doing 20 years ago. So if
Mhm.
part of it is I've come to a realization, or a couple things that turned into a more spiritual path for me. At the very
Mhm.
first, me, it
Mhm.
wasn't a very spiritual thing for me. It
Yeah.
was a crutch or a
Mhm.
band-aid to help me learn to sleep again, to help
Yeah.
me let go of some of that. Now it's, I would say, I always say that we're all doing the best we can, trying to, figure out what the hell's going on in here. But like, we're
Yeah.
all just doing the best we can. And
Yeah.
so to be able to bring my real self to more moments, and maturity, I think, helps too,
Mhm.
as you get older, and you have kids, and other people come into your lives, and partners come into your lives. You start to be able to connect with yourself a little bit more authentically, and you relax a little bit more into yourself.
Mhm.
I think spiritually, my practice has deepened for sure. I know now, like at the time, I was like, okay, I'm doing a body scan. I'm going to relax my body. But I know now that there is so much information going on between us that isn't being said verbally.
Mm,
Even though you're in Toronto, where are you?
yeah, London, Ontario. So not too
Ontario.
far from Toronto. Yeah.
Um,
Ontario, you had right. Yes.
yeah, it's so funny. Like, even though, we're not together, I can
Yeah.
still feel that we don't end at the boundary of our skin, that we are
Yeah.
interacting right now. We're interbeings. And
Yeah.
a lot of the times, we think of it as it's not just a neurobiological concept. We're not separate. And I think what
Hmm.
I've learned over the years is that we live in an illusion that we're separate because of the way we were taught when we were
Hmm.
very young. When we were
Hmm.
very young, we were taught to think, I always do this from the neck up.
Yes, definitely.
Thinking and thinking, and you
Yeah.
you raise your hand, I know the answer, and it's the wrong answer, everyone laughs, and okay, your ego tells you don't do that again. And that's
Yes,
a lot of
definitely.
conditioning, and that's thinking. And what I think is, or at least what I try to teach everyone, is that there's you know that there's a default mode of the brain. We talk about the default mode of the brain a lot. What shows up in brain scans when we're not meditating, and it turns
Mhm.
out we're not really good at not doing anything. And
Mm,
most of the time, our brain is doing a lot. It's thinking
mhm,
or emoting in some way. And,
mhm,
and so we talk about the default mode of the brain of being always reactive in doing.
mhm.
I think the real default mode of the brain comes from watching little kids where
Mm.
they know how to be,
Yeah,
right?
and play.
Be and feel and really emote and be sensitive, and
Yeah,
that hasn't been taught out of them yet because they're so
yeah,
young and they have that beginner's mind. I think we can shift that default mode back to being and feeling and thinking and choosing, instead of just reacting to our phones and to the stimulus, and
right.
just overreacting, and trying to keep up with the noise that comes out of these machines at all hours of the day. So I don't know if
Yeah,
that directly answers the question, but I feel like that's been my progress. So I went from sleep to really knowing that
yes, definitely.
knowingness, that there's no boundary between our skins, that we are.
Well, I do feel like a shift in you since because we haven't really been in touch a lot. Like we've kind of kept in touch, but not really. And so, it has been probably 13 years. So I don't, at that in 2013, maybe I can't remember where you were at, but maybe at that point in time it was still more for sleep, would you say, or more, that the kind of physical and mental benefits. And now, it seems like there's more just a spiritual awareness. So that kind of leads into this question, which is that I wondered if meditation, this practice, has led you to have any spiritual experiences that you wanted to share.
One of the best ones that came. So I studied under Deepak Chopra many many years ago, and I remember there was a part in his course when he teaches the teachers where they talk about the higher states of consciousness. And I was going there to just learn how to meditate. And I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, I'm not doing this part. I'm going to skip this class. Right. And I'm kind of grateful that I did. I obviously had to go back and take it to become a teacher, but um, I remember skipping that portion of the class. And then because back then I was so skeptical if this was even going to work,
Mhm.
that someone telling me something might have planted something in my mind. I was that narrow-minded,
Mhm.
and I'm okay to admit that now. So
Mhm.
going back and thinking about what happened to me when I started meditating regularly. So I started meditating regularly, and then there was a time where, when you meditate and you're in that space that is the Sufi poet Rumi would call it the door sill between awake and asleep.
Yeah.
You're not asleep,
Yeah.
but you might not be awake and something weird has happened. That
Yeah.
started to happen to me a lot, where I was in that creative, that samadhi, that zone,
Mhm.
and I started to search for it. And when you go searching for anything, you're not going to find it anymore. So I had to let that go. And one of the things the class that I missed had taught us something about this witnessing awareness. And one night I was sleeping, and I don't tell this story that often. One night I was sleeping and I became aware of myself sleeping in bed. Like I was above myself,
Mhm.
aware of myself sleeping. And I thought, well,
Okay.
this is odd.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what the hell just happened? I woke right up and I was like, not scared or anything. But then I
Yeah.
remember taking the class and going, oh, this will start to happen. You will
Mhm.
start to become aware of a very spiritual, deep side of yourself.
Mhm.
And having that ability now, that it happens more often now, but I'm I'm not as blown away by it, but that was
Yeah.
probably my first inkling into, oh, there's something else going on here, and I need to tap into that. My problem was, as always, I'm in my dosha is a pitta. My
Yes,
pitta,
fire.
so I'm very, I want to, okay, tell me how this works.
Yeah.
I don't want this to happen. I want this. I'm doing it right. This should be happening. And with this practice, it's like the more you try, the less anything's going to happen. It's almost like you got to find that balance between
Yeah.
relaxed and focused,
Yeah,
and being
definitely.
awake to the moment. So, in the beginning, like I said, less spiritual, more sleep and less stress and stuff like that. But now I think I still meditate, not only for that, but the reality is I know that I'm cultivating something. What do you
Yes,
want
for
to
sure.
cultivate on this
Yeah.
very short time we have on this planet? What do you want to cultivate?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I was good at three other things: being lost in thought all the time,
Mm-hmm.
overreactive,
Mm-hmm.
or worrying about stuff that isn't going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
or I could cultivate this authentic connection with the person that's standing right in front of me
Mm-hmm.
and really be in that room. And it changed my relationship with my wife, my kids. I was at more of their games. I was more present to answer questions that normally I'd be like, I don't know the answer to that. And kind of move on, like not being in the room. And
Yeah.
so I try to look at it as I try to cultivate an awareness or a self-awareness so I can be here more than I'm not.
So how did that's amazing, first of all, but I guess I'm wondering about how that experience of, I guess I would describe it as realizing you're not your body. That if you're separated from your body and your consciousness is up here and you're looking at your body, there's that realization that I am not that I'm this awareness that's looking. Is that
Tattavamasi. Have you heard
ah
of that
I
sutra?
haven't.
Tattavamasi.
I
I
haven't.
am that. You are that.
Mm-hmm.
All this is that. That's
Mm-hmm.
all there is. So it's a Sanskrit sutra. It's called
Mm-hmm.
a sutra is a mantra with meaning. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a stitch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a mantra that I'll use often with my daughter before school. We meditate like 10 minutes in the morning, 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll do Tattavamasi. You start to realize that you are that.
Yeah.
Everything is that.
Yeah.
All this is that. And that's all there is. And that took a while.
Yeah.
That took me a while. And I still think, again, I'm scratching the surface of that aspect of of that. I guess we would call it the metaphysical side of things.
Meditation. Yeah. So did that shift your view of yourself in terms of like why you're on the planet? That's what's coming up is like, was that like, okay, I'm not,
I
is there
constantly ask
something
myself
bigger than yeah, like, what am I here to do? Or what am I here to express? Or like, what's happened? You know what I mean? Because I feel like up until that point, I had a similar experience of that. And up until that point, um, I was just living in terms of how we all live, in terms of this is what you do next type thing, just conditioned, not really thinking too hard about it. After having that realization, like, oh, I'm consciousness, I'm a soul. I'm not this body or even this personality. So what am I here for? Like, what's the purpose, I guess? Just
yeah.
wondering if that awakened
every,
anything similar in you.
every day. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But every day I ask the same questions. I ask the
Mm-hmm.
same questions before I meditate. I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but
No, I don't
the
think so.
the questions of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And we can certainly practice it together at some point too, but it's asking yourself, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question I ask myself, and I get it in. I'm Andy. I'm a runner. I'm from Boston. I'm Irish. Like, you get all those conditioning, right? All
Yes.
the layers and the positions and the possessions, and so peeling back some of those to be able to figure out again, who am I? Asking it
Yeah.
again. And so I'll ask myself a few times. And then the most important question I ask is because whether we realize it or not, who am I and what do I really, really want are
Mm-hmm.
guiding the majority of our life's decisions. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to get super clear on what it is we really want
Mm-hmm.
so we can figure out our dharma. And that's the third
Mm-hmm.
question is,
Yeah.
how can I help? What is my dharma? What is my purpose? And every day I'll say that, particularly if I feel myself getting stressed,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, how can I help? Because
Mm-hmm.
trigger in my mind to say, I'm shifting my perspective from my ego-based reality of me
Mm-hmm.
to how can I help us. And
Yes.
that to me
All.
has a profound shift in how I just deal with myself more compassionately, where before I might not be so kind to myself. It just opened up more doorways for me. So I'll ask those every morning before I meditate.
So okay, that's what I was going to ask. So you ask those before you meditate, the questions of the
Yeah.
soul. And then as you're meditating, you just you kind of simmer is the word that's coming up in the answer. Maybe not even the mental answer, but the feeling tone of the answers of those questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We let it go. Like it's maybe 5 minutes of my meditation. I
Yeah.
ask the question, let it go, ask it
Mm-hmm.
again, let it go,
Mm.
ask the next question a couple times. And then after we let it go, my teacher, and you met him and interviewed him, David G,
Yes.
what
Yeah.
I always say is like, okay, now let him go. Let the
Mm.
universe work out the little details. We don't need to get involved.
Yeah.
Just let them, and then I get into a meditation practice. So I always think of it as like a way of setting myself up from being my best self, and asking, possibly, what am I grateful for? And I think
Right.
that's
Yeah. To get you in that energy of that appreciation.
yeah.
Right. So before we clicked record too, we also briefly touched on, well, first just let me say before we leave that topic that
Sure.
again, this guide that I channel, I just want to share this with you because the focus that she always brings up is what am I here to express? Like what energy am I here to express so that it becomes more of like a quality that you can emanate each
Mm.
day rather than like this thing that you have to figure out how to do, right? So it's more like because you can, if you think of it, you can emanate that today in this moment if you know what it is rather
Yeah,
than like trying to figure out the doing aspect. So I just wanted to tack that on to the questions of the soul.
I love that. It's fascinating. I've never tried it.
Hmm.
I think I need to.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just a different way of thinking of it because what I found for myself is it kind of elevates me out of the mental construct of just the constant doing.
Yeah, yeah,
Even in the realm of like this, so I'm making YouTube videos or doing. It's like, okay, but as I'm doing that, as I'm doing those things that yes, I want to do, like as I'm doing it, what energy am I emanating as I'm doing it? It's just I found that it has snapped me back into the present and being able to wake up and be like, well, I can do that today. I don't have to wait until, I have a certain number of subscribers or this or that I've achieved. In the external reality, mine is more joy, play, kind of
yeah.
a lightness. And so, yeah, so when I focus on that, I feel like, okay, I can do that each day, at least for a
Now,
portion of the day. So
do you feel like that helps you manage your energy better?
yeah, because there's not so much pressure on
Yeah,
in terms of the doing, because the reality is like when you are self-employed, which I know you are as well, it's like there's a constant stream of things you could be doing. It's like a never ending, you could really overdo it in terms of things to quote unquote do.
yeah.
The list is a mile long. So if I was trying to accomplish all of those things at once because they're all on the list and I know what they are without this awareness of how I want to be as I do them. It kind of takes the pressure off because I don't have to get as much done on that to-do list. What's more important is that what I'm emanating and what frequency I'm
Yeah.
putting out into the world as I'm doing those things, which can be even like simple things like, driving to pick up my son from school. Like that seems like, a very simple thing, but can I be an emanation of like a specific frequency in that menial, it's not really menial, but your mind tells you that it's menial. You know what I mean?
I love what you're saying here, and I agree with you. I don't think I've ever been able to articulate that, but I
Mm,
feel the same way when I
yeah.
go to pick up my daughter.
Yeah.
And there's certain rules that I have. Not, I mean, there are rules, but it's like, don't go on your phone. You
Yeah,
don't need to
exactly.
come back
Yeah.
to this moment.
Yeah.
What's going on out here? What's
Yeah.
happening? There's a lot of that in what might seem meaningless tasks, and that
Yes.
kind of happened too when I first started meditating. I always ran with my iPod. Like
Hmm.
that was my thing back in the day when
Hmm.
iPods were big. I always ran with some type of audio, And
Mhm.
now, I would think since probably, unless I'm like running more than 3 hours, which I don't do anymore,
Mhm.
uh, and there's a good podcast I want to listen to, I won't use anything because it forces me to come back into nature. It forces me to
Mm.
feel more
Yeah.
and to kind of notice what I'm emanating, I guess, but I never knew what that that's what I was trying to convey to
Yeah, for
myself.
sure. Yeah, just going back to when you're picking up your daughter, I just relate to that because I just think like, okay, it feels menial because this is I pick them up same time each day, it's just this routine that we have. But like, how do I want to show up for him in that moment when he sees me and he's walking towards the car, right? Like, because this is what he's going to remember, is if I'm anchoring like a certain state every day, or at least trying to aim for a certain state. Every day is different, but aiming for how I want to show up for him. So yeah, I resonate with what you're saying. Yeah.
I agree. It's more for me. It's easy for me to sit there and look at my phone and
Yeah.
wait and ignore other people. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
so much out there
Yeah.
that it's like, okay, well, what are you afraid of?
Yes, totally.
And you bring yourself to this moment so she can also see that I'm
Hmm.
not, I'm not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
She would point that out anyway, but
And your daughter's name is Faith. Am I
she's
correct?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. She is so
Beautiful
great.
name. Yeah.
Yes, she's my little best friend.
So let's go back for a second to I just feel like touching again on by the way, I'm not actually asking you any questions that I had written down, which is
Oh, I
hilarious.
love
We're just kind of in the
this.
flow, so I'm rocking it. I'm just
Yeah, yeah,
going
yeah.
with it. But let's just go back because I think you touched on something really, really important that I just want to bring up again so that we can talk about it, which is the distraction. Because you had said, like, what are you afraid of? And I think that's so important to just for all of us to witness that sometimes, especially with a phone or whatever your personal distraction is, but let's face it, the phone is like a big one for many of us, that when you revert to your phone
Mhm.
and you start scrolling, like what are you avoiding when you're doing that?
Mhm.
Just that's, let's
So,
talk about that.
okay, so I'll give you an example, and sometimes we'll call this in yoga, they call it the wheel of samsara.
Yeah.
You know, the wheel of samsara is this wheel of suffering, sometimes it's
Hmm.
called. It's not always the wheel of suffering, it's a wheel of choices, and the first one, they call it a karmic choice. So my karmic choice sometimes, and this will make me sound really bad, but I'm just being honest.
Hmm.
The, my karmic choice sometimes is when I go to pick up my daughter when she was younger, is to go on my phone. Why? Because I want to see, when I see her, I can put my phone down
Hmm.
immediately.
Hmm.
If I'm talking to somebody about a class that I taught at the pickup line and they
Hmm.
want to know, and I'm grateful for those conversations, but
Hmm.
sometimes there's a fear in me that I'm not going to be able to give my all at the time that I want to give my all.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that repetition, that action I take
Mhm.
leads to the memory of, okay, well, that worked for me yesterday. And that memory,
Mm.
Ankara,
Mhm.
repetitive memory that fuels my desire to then make that choice again. So the
Mhm.
choice that I'm making, it's a safe choice, but it's not always the one that's going to lead me to my best self.
Right.
And so sometimes my fear is more, will I get in a conversation with someone that I don't know all the answers to?
Right. Yeah, totally. Well, I think what you're saying is relevant to everyone because yeah, I just feel like when we revert to the phone, we're avoiding something within. So like what is that? What is like the exploration? Even if you keep doing it, this is what I think is cool. Even if you keep doing it, you're on the phone, but you recognize in the moment that
Mhm.
you're doing it, that you're avoiding something. Like I think that's a breakthrough because if you do you know what I mean? If you're doing it
90% of it.
unconsciously, yeah. So just
That's
the
90% of it, because it becomes a
yeah,
great trigger to say,
yeah,
okay, well, you don't have to deal with it,
yeah.
but you're aware now. It's hard to go back when you're self-aware, right? It's
I
hard to know
know.
that you're avoiding something, right? So it gives you
Yeah,
time, and
yeah,
maybe you're not ready to, and that's fine too. But
yeah,
it gives you time to say, and that's why these, I think, we're not gonna get rid of them, so we may as well
yeah,
use them to our advantage too.
yeah.
And that's
Right.
there's little things like that when I pick it up, my first question is, what is my intention?
Mm-hmm.
Why? why are you picking what do you need to get away from? What is the stimulus that's gonna, make me feel good? Oh, I'm on Instagram and I'm seeing, oh, that's a former student. She's teaching a great workshop, and oh, I'm so proud of her. And okay, where's the next one? Where's that next dopamine hit? And so part of it is, why am I doing it? And then
Right, exactly.
if it's 2 hours later and I've been scrolling, it's like, well, what did you just miss?
Yes, exactly. Right. Well, it's easy to get sucked in for that length of time too, really, because you kind of lose track of yourself. Like, I mean, what I find is I get disconnected from my body. That's one. And then, your attention just gets pulled in. It's almost like, again, going back to that analogy of the radio, it's like a vibrational frequency, a bandwidth that you're attuned to. And then like, what's the expense? Like, because you're just paying attention to this, what are you not paying attention to? Either what's going on in your mental body, your energy body, or in your environment. So it just becomes I think it's just a really interesting practice to be aware when, like, just as I just said, to be aware when you're doing it. Not necessarily, like, first step isn't to stop you to get off the thing, or, do you know what I'm saying? But just to be aware, like, if you can just bring your attention to, okay, I'm scrolling again mindlessly, and I'm witnessing that I'm doing that. And then just a simple question like, okay, what am I trying to escape from, or what am I trying to avoid? Because a lot of times what I find is it's just an energy or an emotion coming up that maybe you don't want to deal with, or is uncomfortable, don't have the skills yet to process that. And so the easiest thing is just to look for some sort of distraction, phone, food, shopping, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I love that, how you're explaining that, because it's so important. Just the self-awareness aspect of it alone that's always 90% of the work. Because now, if you're aware you're doing it at some point, even if you don't judge yourself, even as a mind, like, you're just scrolling, it's not mindless, right? If we're kind to ourselves, it's just we're just scrolling like everyone else,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
And then we're like, okay, now we're aware.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, just like in meditation, you're going to realize you have a choice. And your choice is to keep scrolling, or keep unconsciously scrolling, or maybe now you're asking the question, what needs not being met? Because there's probably an unmet need in that moment that is preventing you from feeling safe, connected, or satisfied. And those are really the only three things that it could be for your for your physical body.
Right.
So asking yourself, what is this choice good for me? Is it good for the people around me? Okay, then maybe I should put it down and focus on something else. It's probably might be good for you in the moment. But now you're aware. And that's what meditation to me is all about, is becoming more self-aware, to create more creativity and a boatload of more choices, instead of letting you just fall into the same old boring, predictable ones that you've been doing for the most of your life.
Right, exactly. Because with that authentic self that we've been talking about, that starts to emerge as a result of meditation, with that, it's almost like what I feel is like, naturally, with that emergence of that authentic self, it almost rides on the wave of creativity. Like, there's also creative energy there, because all of a sudden you're kind of free to do what you really feel called to do, rather than what you've been conditioned to believe that you should do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Because I'm going back to, when my daughter was in second grade many years ago, and just scrolling and asking myself, what need is not being met. What I realized, and it took a long time, and I've been doing it, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, is it took me a while to figure out that I wasted a lot of my mental energy to be distracted.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
So much.
totally.
And I've had the tools that I know that helps restore my energy,
Yeah.
but I was using it in a way of, well, I'm aware, but it's just like, it didn't make any sense to me at some point, where it's like, you're wasting so much time in this exhaustive rumination, and you only have so much energy every single day. So why not turn your attention to what is bothering you, what is not being met right now, as opposed to fighting and pushing and resisting. And so I still work with that every day as well. I still always do. But it was an eye-opening experience to say, just go the other way.
Definitely. And you're kind of bringing up another point that I'm thinking of, is like, because we do have this limited, the reality is that we're infinite, but as we're in these bodies, there are limitations in terms of time. We only have so much time in our day, in our lifetime. If we're you know, spending time in these distractions and not choosing to pull ourselves out of them, then, you know, all of that time is energy that could be used towards our creativity or the expression of our authentic self, which I think in the end would be way more fulfilling than, you know, scrolling on social media or whatever it is. Not, again, I totally agree that there's a time and a place for it. And I
Sure.
definitely, you know, sometimes when I'm ungrounded, particularly after channeling or whatever it is, like I'll purposefully be like, okay, I'm going to go on my phone for like 20 minutes. I'm going to set a timer because that actually helps bring me down to earth. But, you know, I try to do it more with intention and more consciously. But, you know, that thought that we're taking away time that we could be using for our
Yeah.
soul expression. I don't know.
But
It's
you're
just
right.
an
It is
interesting.
about management.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
managed.
for sure. Yeah, for
Call
sure.
it. I call it. I'm Dad's gonna go numb out for about 20 minutes. That's
Yeah.
what that's what I'll say. I'm just gonna go numb out for 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
everyone gets like that because then after you do that, then you know that you're bringing back a better version of yourself.
Yes.
It's the same with meditation. You know, whenever I meditate and I say, particularly when the kids were younger, I was like, oh, I'm leaving them in front of the TV for 20 minutes, and I'm like, well, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to be a better dad if I get myself right
Yes,
first.
definitely.
Taking those 20 minutes always made me feel better coming out.
For sure. So let's just briefly talk about, you know, because people ask me all the time, because I'm always recommending meditation, as I said,
Sure.
but people ask me, like, what type of meditation do you do? And to be honest, it's very simple. I just, you know, try to listen to an ambient sound in my environment, whether that's the fridge humming, or sometimes I'll have an audio track with more of like a drone in the background. It just needs something to focus my mind on a sound. And I find that really works for me. But for you, what kind of meditation do you teach, and what kind of meditation has really worked for you? What type?
So now you made me think of that. I want to just search for something while we're talking, but what your meditation sounds really interesting in the sense that you're right. They're all, no matter what type of meditation that you do, you're always going to need some type of a focus, of course. So can you tell me, can you see this?
Yes, that is.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's not
I
backwards.
always, it's not
Yeah.
that good.
No, it's
Um,
perfect.
I always say that there are so many different types of meditation out there, and your job is to kind of figure out which one works for you. But they kind of, a lot of them do fall into these three categories. And I have it, it's like an hourglass approach to meditation.
Mhm,
And so there are focused meditations. Sometimes we call them mantra meditations, or what you were doing. You were using the object of your attention for listening
mhm,
meditation, using the sound as your focus.
mhm,
So a lot of them are a way of just harnessing your attention, bringing it in a relaxed way. You're not overly focused on that noise, but you're letting it into your awareness.
mhm.
You're aware, you're distracted, you come back to it, right? So
Yes,
that
exactly.
leads us to like the center of that hourglass where I'll say like one grain of sand falls through at a time. And that's
Mhm,
our mindfulness
mhm,
meditations. And mindfulness meditations connect you to the moment. It kind of refines the present moment, but it
mhm,
connects you to the moment whether you like it or not,
mhm,
whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And sometimes that's when we see that so many times what's really happening right now is distorted and clouded because of our thinking,
mhm,
because of our hopes, our fears, our dreams, our desire, our conditioning. And
mhm,
mindfulness meditation has a way of saying, oh, let's filter out that story. Let's connect you to the facts of your direct experience. And
mhm,
so those are like your emotional, focusing on emotions, or walking, or eating, or the body scan, or breath meditation is what I do most, or yoga. Those are all fall into a mindfulness practice. And then it kind of bells back out. So once you refine the moment and you're
mhm,
accurately seeing the moment for what it is, they lead
mhm,
to more passion meditations. And those are
mhm,
more opening yourself back up to what's really happening, but having a perspective of we,
mhm,
it totally transformed the way I look at my life, because I started to notice that when I'm meditating and I'm focused on, let's say it's the sound, right? And I lose the focus and I'm drifting off here. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Andy, what are you doing? Come back to the sound. And you see the way I'm treating myself, right?
mhm.
It's not
Oh,
technically.
right. Yeah.
So that compassion starts to wake up and say, you know what? Everyone does this. You got to be nice to
Mhm,
yourself. And
mhm.
I started to find things that I actually liked about myself instead of being so constantly fixated on, you got to do this better and you suck
Yeah.
at this. And, you start to open up a little bit more, where you start to view situations for what's really happening and less from an ego based reality. So out of all those types of meditation, I do think they fall into like a mantra of focus. a
Mhm.
mindfulness or a compassion meditation. And certainly there are so many others that I'm not even speaking of, but those are basically the ones I teach. How to do it? Did you
Yes,
ask me?
how to do it. Yeah,
How
yeah,
to,
how to do it. Oh, you have to
and
flip that one. Yep.
there we
Now it's good.
go. So like you were saying, you were focused on something, right? So
Mhm.
everything starts with a focus, and you're aware. And you can't be too rigid. This is what I'm saying. The doorway, Rumi was saying, the doorway between you can't be super relaxed. You can't
Mhm.
like numb out, but
Mhm.
you can't be too rigidly focused either, or it won't work. You just have to start to become aware that you have an object of attention. Usually I do with the breath. So I'm
Mhm.
focused on the physical sensation of feeling my breath. And then what happens? We all get distracted.
Mhm.
We go to that distraction. But at this point, KB, we're not even aware we're distracted.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, because
Distracted.
you just get so sucked in that, you could spend 10 minutes in that distraction before you realize you've lost yourself.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's so important to know, because
Yeah.
there's times where you're like, oh wow, now I'm distracted. And now I'm distracted by what? By thoughts, feelings, sensations, or a noise. Sometimes the people will say it's the noises that drive me the craziest in meditation. I was like, well, the noise is there to remind you that you're off the object of attention. You're
Mhm.
not focused on the breath anymore, because that judgment tells me you're not in the moment. And the
Right.
judgment could be, oh great, I'm distracted. And having a sense of kindness toward yourself, because at some point when you're distracted, you become aware.
Yeah.
And that's the magic moment of mindfulness I'm talking about. That
Mhm.
awareness is now, oh, I'm distracted.
Mhm.
I have a choice. I can keep, being distracted, or keep, oh, why is that person mowing the lawn on 3 in the morning, whatever, I don't know why that doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Um, you have a choice to say, okay, my choice is to come back to the breath. And every time you make that choice to keep coming back to the breath in meditation, no matter how many times, and you do it with a little bit of compassion towards yourself and not beating
Mhm.
yourself up emotionally or
Mhm.
mentally, you start to develop that muscle against the resistance I was talking about in the very beginning.
Mm.
Start to strengthen the neural connections in your brain that help with your attention, your memory, and your compassion and empathy.
Mhm.
Mostly for we're not meditating. So a
Mhm.
lot of the time I could be riddled with thinking and thinking and thinking, oh, breath, thinking, breath, and how I'm treating myself again,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Noticing that. When you do that, it's kind of, I'll call it like a mental push-up. So
Mhm.
each repetition becomes a mental push-up. And the more you do it, the easier it gets down the line to start to become more aware when you're not meditating that, oh,
Mhm.
I'm distracted by this story. And wait a minute, is that reality? Or
Yeah.
did I just make that up?
Is
You
that
know, you
true? As
yeah,
Byron Katie likes to say.
right,
Yeah.
right. Is that true?
Yeah.
Or I would say, is it true? And are you being kind right now?
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times we're not being so kind when I find myself,
Mhm.
in that judgment. Um,
Yes, definitely.
and so that to me is the process of meditation. And you
Yeah.
do that for a
Mhm.
specific amount of time, whether it's, there's enough science out there that says that you can get benefits of doing it twice a day, 10 minutes, 10 minutes twice a
So,
day.
yeah, for sure. So, and I agree with that. And I've been, when I do my daily meditation, I usually do it first thing in the morning because I've noticed, and just through some study too, I've realized that because our brain waves, when we first wake up, are kind of almost still in that twilight phase. It's so much easier, Andy, if you just do it first thing. That's why when David G is like, wake up, brush your teeth, pee, meditate, it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
rise,
I
be
get,
meditation. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. 1
It's
p.m.
like, oh, that makes sense. So I find it easier to meditate first thing. So I guess that's a question, like, two questions. What's the simplest way to meditate, I guess? And do you
Okay.
have any little tips like that? Like, would you agree about the time of day being important?
Yeah,
And
that's a great question. So I'm similar in terms of time of day. I wake up at the same time every day. I meditate the same time every day. In the mornings, for me, it's easy to go right to your devices. So like
Mhm,
going to my phone or
definitely.
going to, like, it's so easy to do that. So I say just, like David G says, rise, pee, meditate, go to a
Mhm,
different room in your house,
mhm,
get comfortable. I put a blanket on me. I sit
mhm.
in a chair that reclines but doesn't go all the way back, so I'm like falling asleep. So there's that sense of being as comfortable as possible, as David G says. I was
Mhm,
quoting him the other day as like, comfort is queen. You want to
mhm.
be as comfortable as possible, or you're not going to meditate. You're not
Yeah,
going to want to be tomorrow. So that's part of it. I meditate for 20 minutes because that's just for me. I kind of need to see the struggle a little bit. There are some days I'll go the first 10 minutes and I'm like, this is terrible.
Mhm.
But if I get over like to 13 minutes, it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, there's a zone. There's a
There it is.
zone. I think we
But
should tell people that there's a zone.
there is, and you can get into it
Yeah.
through a little bit of resistance,
Yeah.
just a little. And sometimes we want to go in and say, oh, well, I should think no thoughts, and I should be wrapped in this blanket of bliss. And that's not the reality. There are
Yeah.
going to be times that your meditation feels like a workout. And
Yeah.
then there are other times where I go to sit and I'm like, I don't need it.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, oh my God, I was so anxious.
Yeah. You don't even
Because
realize it until you're on,
connected,
in your
yeah,
chair or wherever it is. You're like,
right.
"Yes."
I'm like,
Yeah,
what the hell? I guess I did need it. But
exactly.
that's the check-in, right?
Yeah.
So use it as some place to check in. So I do it 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. I'll
Mhm.
always say I'd rather you start with 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon,
Mhm.
much more than I'd rather you do 20 minutes in the morning.
Mhm. Right.
Because I think the brain loves frequency.
Yeah.
So the more you can devote to short moments of attention, the
Mhm.
easier it will to strengthen it, I believe. At least for me, I was able to see, oh, if I do 10 and 10, and then I started adding to it, and to
Mhm.
the point where I got to 20. So I say length of time, be comfortable. Length of time is sit for the amount of time that you
Mhm.
say you're going to when you start.
Okay.
So say you only have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Sit for those 5 minutes, no matter what
Mhm.
happens. Practice
Yes.
accepting what happens in those 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And know that even if you think it's a waste of time, I promise you it's not.
Yeah.
Because
Like, even if you feel like nothing is happening and you get off, like, yeah, the 5 minutes end and you're like, "Well, that didn't do anything," because that's really
yeah,
common when you first start, right?
right. I wasted my time. Well, this is
Yeah.
not for me. Right. If
Yeah.
you can just do that and then build some consistency, I promise you that connection, that body mind connection that only we separate verbally by saying it, that
Mhm.
connection gets stronger. And it's
Right, and
kind
that's it's like I was
of,
just gonna say that zone, what I found is, like, that zone when you experience it for the first time, which maybe could take a while, let's just be realistic, but when you
yeah,
experience it for the first time, it just feels so good that there's almost more motivation or more of a desire to be like, "Oh, let me try that again," because it feels good physically, it feels good mentally to, like, reach that zone, and it for me, I've noticed it becomes easier to
yeah.
reach there. Yeah.
But if you're like me, as soon as I hit that space, I was
Mhm.
like, I want that again. I want
Mm.
that tomorrow, and I want that the next day. And that
Yeah.
becomes an object like that's a successful meditation to me,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's not. And
Yes. Yeah.
that's what
That's
I
such a
keep
good
harping
point. That's
keep
such a
harping
good
on
point.
David Lee, but he says that too all the time. He'll say,
Mhm.
you know what? It doesn't matter if you're hitting that or not. You're hitting it. You're
Yeah.
just not aware of it.
That's a
What
good
you're
point.
trying to do is build an awareness. And if you let go a little bit,
Yeah.
it will start to happen more. If you go looking for it, you're going to hold yourself at the level of your mind, your intellect, and your ego, and you're going to swim at the most shallowest part of awareness.
That's such a good point. So do you think when you say we're hitting it every time, we're just not aware of it? So we're accessing, just checking the time, but we're just accessing Andy's got to go at a certain time, so I want to be
Oh,
mindful
sorry.
of that. But
Sorry.
we are accessing maybe that frequency or that bandwidth, and maybe our conscious mind is not aware of it. But if we are intending to sit and meditate, then some part of us is accessing that state.
Absolutely. And you'll notice it when you're doing other things throughout your day. If you're in a job that you absolutely love, or you
Hmm.
see it with athletes is the easiest for me to see. If you see someone that's really connected on the field and they know
Hmm.
where someone else is and they throw them the ball and they know that they're basketball players, I see it a lot.
Hmm.
They're tapping into it all the time. They
Right.
may not have a word for it or they may not be aware of it, but that's the zone. That's
Right.
like I said, that's samadhi. That is that gap between our thoughts. We're all touching that gap. And you wake up to it more if you don't try so hard. And
Right.
if you're
Yeah.
so
Trying is
so
like the trying is like the enemy of all of
yeah.
this. Yeah.
So if you set the time, okay, so
Yeah.
let's get back to let's set the time. And
Yeah.
now I'll add two things to that. Um, I want you to set the time for whatever it is. And then when you get into the meditation, the objective will be to surrender to whatever's happening in the moment
Mhm.
with innocence. So surrender and innocence become
Mm.
the key to this. Like,
Mhm.
okay, be curious about it,
Mhm.
but surrender to whatever's happening because it's happening. So why
Yeah.
fight it?
That's
And then
awesome.
you'll start to go. I think you'll start to go a little deeper.
Right, for sure. So you're just bringing up like just want to ask maybe one more question, because you're bringing up when you're talking about the, when you're talking about the athletes, what I was thinking of is these flow states,
Mm.
right? Which I also have been, I've been vocal channeling for the last few months, and just in the last few days, for some reason, my intuition is like, read about flow states and talk about flow states, because it feels to me that there are similarities there, or maybe it is even the exact same thing. So I just wanted to ask you your perspective on like channeling, flow states, meditation, whatever you want to share in regards to that. Like, is there a connection there between meditation and these flow states? Like when you're not
Absolutely.
actually sitting on your meditation cushion, but you're just moving out into the world, like, is there a link there between being
I
able
believe,
to access those and meditation?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I mean, I see it. I see it with teams. I have to go back to what I know. And I've seen teams meditate,
Hmm.
and I've seen them be on the same page without being like, verbally being on the same page.
Mm,
I've seen it happen just people in my own life. In terms of that flow state, I think you get into it off the mat. So
mm,
not
right.
I think you do the mental push-ups, and sometimes that
Mm,
can seem like it's work and it's not working, but then you see, oh wow, that my day was a little bit easier today. Oh my
mm,
goodness, this didn't bother me so much today. I was able to go with the flow a
mhm,
little bit more. And that's kind of what you're searching for, is that, is my day a little lighter? Is
right.
everything going a little easier? So
Mhm.
that's what I see in terms of like specific flow states off the mat. And
Okay.
I don't know if that even answers it, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and I was gonna say what I've noticed even just very recently is like strange synchronicities. Even we even had one, how like
Yes.
when we were first getting on Zoom, we were just like, oh, we're like on the same
Yeah.
frequency. We're on the same radio station when we were starting to talk. And even your hourglass, I found interesting, because in my meditations that I do, the channeled meditations, my guide has often brought through the analogy of the water of the hourglass, where the top of the hourglass is the mind and the bottom is the heart, and the narrow part is your neck. And so
Wow.
we've been doing these meditations where she leads everyone in kind of dropping the sand, the energy down into your heart space, and everyone finds it really, I guess, effective or
What's the most
interesting.
what's the most constricted part of your body sometimes? For
Yeah,
me,
like yeah,
myself.
yeah, exactly. And our even
Sometimes
if
I'm
you
like,
think
"Why is
of,
this so tight?" It's because I'm not expressing myself the way I want to be expressing myself.
that's
And
so
that's
true,
such a
because
great
yeah,
analogy
it's
of the
that
head.
narrow part. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it might even be, in terms of symbology, in terms of your expression of your authentic self. It's
yeah.
like, oh, we can't have our authentic voice, or we can't authentically express because of all these constraints. So, anyways, it's just interesting
I
because
love that.
the
Yeah, and,
flow state thing.
we talk about synchronicity all the time. And
Yeah, it
synchronicity,
starts happening more, right?
absolutely, and that's
Yeah.
another sign. Like, I think about somebody and then they call.
Hmm.
Right, that synchronicity happens all the time. It happens more, with me. For some weird reason, it'll happen with David G and I.
Hmm.
Like, he'll say something
Hmm.
to me, and then all of a sudden, I was just thinking that, or just doing it 20 minutes ago, and that to me is the weird connection that I have
Yeah.
with him. But
Yeah.
certainly, I can tell, and to some, as a parent, I can
Yes.
tell what my kids are thinking before.
Or vice versa. Sometimes roads will
Oh,
just say something. I'm like, even recently, a month or two ago, I was thinking of someone, that he knows, but we haven't
yeah.
seen them in months. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of her, and out of the blue, he asks like how she's doing or something. I'm like, man, this little guy is like quite either connect to me or telepathic or both. I'm not sure, but
I did it
it's that
yesterday.
interconnection.
Yeah, I did it with my wife yesterday. She was at the top of the stairs, and I said, "I'm thinking of a word right now that it was just a random word," and she said it, and I was like, "Isn't that so weird?" And she knew, because it was probably based on a conversation we were having earlier. It's just a word that everyone uses, that I'm just sick and tired of everyone using. I go, "I'm
Yeah,
thinking of a word." She goes, "Is the word?" And I was like, "That's it." And it's that
amazing.
connection that you have with somebody, that
Hmm.
connect, what I think it's all about, and deepening that connection. And one of the ways I find helps me is
Hmm.
meditate.
For sure, 100%. Well, before we go, Andy, I just wanted you to share like your current offerings, because I know you have a teacher training coming up, and I know you're really involved in the Boston area. So can you tell us what you have coming up in terms of your teachings and offerings?
Sure. I think my biggest thing is in January of 2024, I start my 3-month meditation for everyone teacher training. And it kind of goes through the same type of flow of the hourglass. When you think about it, where we're focused on fixing ourselves. So we focus on ourselves and helping ourselves before we try to help people find their own path back. It's such a great training because I spent 3 months kind of planting the seeds. And then by the time spring comes and it gets warm in Boston, it's kind of like you start to see them sprout and the students start to flower. But what we're really trying to do is help bring more quality meditation guides. I always say that we have so many quality yoga teachers out there. What I want is someone to be able to bring it into the areas that I teach, which is a lot of corporations where they're like, well, do I need a yoga mat? No. Do I need to wear yoga? No. We'll just come and we'll teach you how to connect with yourself. So you can be a little bit, maybe it's more in corporations, they want to be more successful in their career. Okay. But overall, just finding yourself and finding more happiness in your life without searching or forcing or trying to make it happen. So that's pretty much that's it. I mean, I teach weekly classes here in the Boston area. That's on my website, and I teach privately and a lot of, I have 14 different workshops that I'm doing at any given time.
Amazing.
Well, this has been an absolute honor to be here. I miss you.
Thank you so much.
It reminded me how much I miss you and
Yes.
Daryl.
Yeah.
I don't even think I've ever met your son. So,
well, hopefully we'll come back to Boston, Cape Cod at some point. And, I hope to it's nice to connect online, but I do hope we can connect in person. So, just to go though, I just want you to share your website because I don't think we shared that. So what's your website?
It's thebostonbuddha.com.
Easy.
Thebostonbuddha.com is my
awesome.
brother's.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Andy. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thanks.